Hi, I'm Madison,
And I'm Ursula.
and we're going to talk about Tanzania and the catastrophic water project failure.
Tanzania is the fourth most populous country in sub-Saharan Africa. Most of the country is arid or semi-arid, which means that clean water is hard to come by. Residents collect most of their water from groundwater sources, including local streams and wells. These sources are often not sanitary since they have multiple purposes, including bathing, and they tend to collect runoff from farming. They are contaminated by bacteria and human waste. Because of this contamination, 12% of deaths in Tanzania were related to water and sanitation. Girls are often forced to skip school to collect water for their families. This absence from school contributes to increased gender-based violence. This is a result of a lack of equal education for women and the amount of time that they are left vulnerable on the long trek to and from the well. On the right side of the slide, we have put an image that illustrates the water points that have succeeded and failed in Tanzania. The ones that have failed are illustrated by the red points, and as you can see, there are a lot of these. In fact, in rural areas, 20% of water systems fail within the first year. For many parts of the world, having more efficient and safe access to sanitized water would have a huge impact on quality of life. There are currently 844 million people living without access to safe water. There are 2.3 billion people living without access to improved sanitation because of the quality of their water sources. Women spend approximately 266 million hours every day collecting water. Every 2 minutes, a child dies from water-related diseases, and diarrhea caused by poor access to water is the third leading cause of child death. There would be $18.5 billion in economic benefits each year if deaths were avoided by poor access to sanitary water sources. The bottom line, access to a clean water source is super important. These statistics were for the whole world and not just Tanzania.
In Tanzania's history, there's been many attempts to fix its water system. The Tanzanian government started an initiative called the Rural Water Supply Program in 1971 with hopes of providing every household with drinking water within a 400-meter walk. It was supposed to run for 20 years to bring water to every household in the country, control water prices, and bring new infrastructure. The government built pipes into Tanzanian villages from distant streams, resulting in low water pressure and reliability. A national economic crisis struck in the 1970s, resulting in Tanzania shifting responsibility for water from centralized government to village communities. And in 1991, the national water policy also failed to bring water. In 2003, Bywater, a private water company, seized control of Tanzanian water supply. The increase in privatized water led to inflated prices for community members.
So as Madison mentioned, there have been many attempts to fix the Tanzania water system, but our presentation will focus on the World Bank project. This project started as a Tanzanian government program called the Water Sector Development Program. In 2007, the World Bank joined this project as support to the Tanzanian government, but effectively took control of it instead. The project was initially launched as a few small water points spread out around the country, since the program wanted to test the source strategies they would be implementing before doing it on a large scale.
The World Bank spent $1.42 billion on the project in Tanzania. The project consisted of 5 pump-based systems to bring water directly to villages. They completed those 5 projects in 2007, but 4 stopped functioning within a few years. The World Bank used the same model of the past failed water projects in their design rather than plan to build something new. These designs were based on the ones the Tanzanian government had used in previous water initiatives. Before the project, 54% of Tanzanians had access to water, and after, only 53% of the population had access. The percentage of people with access decreased because of the growing population, so 3.5 million more Tanzanians lacked access to improved water than did before the project began. The project was not able to be scaled, which is why more people lacked water than before.
We will now focus on one specific village that the World Bank launched a project in. The village we chose to talk about is Lupeta, Tanzania, which is a town of approximately 8,000 people in the southern part of the country. In 2007, engineers came to the village center and dug boreholes. According to village chairman, people were so happy that they were dancing. During the 6 years that the water point worked, farmers were able to grow crops with the water directly to their village. But eventually the tap stopped working and the water only came out as a trickle. Residents had to go back in their 10-kilometer trek to collect water from a neighboring source, bringing back all the problems that result from not having access to a clean water source nearby, including girls missing school, farming suffering from a lacking of water, and poor health in the community.
A household survey revealed that all villages have experienced non-functionality of the water infrastructure, with a mean duration of 4.3 months in a year. The non-functionality differs per season and type of source. Engine breakdown is common during the dry season in villages with a borehole, while villages with gravity schemes have problems with pipes being washed out by rainstorms. The minimum time to repair breakdowns was half a day, and the maximum 3 weeks. During this time, several problems arise. While waiting for a technical problem to be fixed, households deployed alternatives to get domestic water, usually fetching water from the neighboring village or using unimproved sources in and out of their villages, and buying water at extra cost. The bar labeled multiple problems indicates responses that include walking a very long distance, getting stomach-related diseases, and buying water at an expensive price. Overall, water was not accessible, making it difficult for everyone to use and unsafe, so people with access were sometimes at risk of disease.
This brings us to what went wrong in Lupeta. In this project, the thing that went wrong was that the intake failed. The people had only been paying 1.2 cents per bucket of water that they consumed from the source in the community while it was functioning properly. Unfortunately, since they had been paying such a small amount, there weren't sufficient funds to pay for an estimated $92,000 replacement to the water point. The Tanzanian government couldn't afford to make up the difference for one town of 8,000 people, since there are many other towns in the country with similar problems. It is common for water points in Tanzania to fail because routine maintenance costs and project parts cannot be paid for. The equipment will fail on the citizens and they can't afford to fix it. Costs are often unrealistic for communities to fix their own infrastructure, and the government can't afford to fix them either.
The projects were established by the World Bank and then expected to function without additional work after they left the project. When the system would break, it was up to the residents to fix it. To buy replacement parts, residents have to buy a bus ticket to get to a hardware store in another district, and getting transportation to the neighboring town's hardware store was difficult and expensive. The cost of transportation and spare parts is unrealistic for individuals to have to be responsible. Local private companies were also unfamiliar with the structures the World Bank used, so they could not help repair them either. Over time, sediment, algae, and dirt fills in water tanks, so tanks must be cleaned out routinely. To maintain them, someone has to drain the tank, scrub the inside, then refill it. However, the World Bank did not assign anyone to this role or leave instructions on how to clean the tank, and as a result, the water was unsanitary and unsafe to use. This picture shows a tank that would be very difficult to clean because of its height. It is very important to design infrastructure that needs to be sanitized in a way that allows for cleaning.
As you can see in this graph, the sources that are most likely to fail are more complicated technology. A motorized pump is more likely to fail than one using gravity. The reason for this is that they are more complicated to maintain and more complicated to fix. Many of the individual water points that were built by the World Bank project were established by engineers, then left up to the community to maintain without proper training and in no way to pay for parts that broke.
Many of the water systems were built in low-income communities whose residents could not pay the operation and maintenance costs. Operation and maintenance was really expensive, and no one was given the responsibility to maintain the system after the World Bank left. The people who attended the Lupeta water tank had some technical knowledge, but not enough to prevent the water failure.
We will now compare this project's failure to the potential problems that we might face with the project we did in Mkutani and the current ones we are working on in Los Sanchez and Kibuon. The reality is that all projects have the likelihood to fail, but after some research into the mistakes that the World Bank made and the work that we did in Mkutani, the Mkutani project should be a lot less likely to fail than the World Bank projects were. The World Bank made the mistake of abandoning the villages after creating the water points without proper training for maintenance or any plan of what to do if the sources failed. We have taken measures in Mkutani that will hopefully counteract the likelihood of failure. We left the community with an operation and maintenance manual written in both Swahili and English. This manual details how to maintain the infrastructure that we put in place and what to do if it fails. We also had people trained in the maintenance of the teachers' houses and bathrooms. We also worked with the leadership to help them understand how important maintenance really is. We made sure that they set up a fund for maintenance, which is drawn from the school's monthly district budget. While we cannot say with 100% certainty that this project will never fail, it is definitely a lot more likely than the World Bank's water projects to be around for the long term.
It is critical to take note of what the Los Sanchez project team can do to ensure the success of the project, because water is a very important resource linked to health, safety, and equality. Some technical things to note are that motorized pumps are 30% more likely to fail over manual ones, so manual pumps are a far more sustainable option. We should also beware of selecting water points with only low or medium groundwater, because these have a 35% chance of failing within a year. We should also ensure that the operation and maintenance manual is given to several people and is easy to understand, because systems that are less complicated are more likely to last. There should also be training and workshops in addition to a written manual to improve effectiveness and responsibility. Community management is important, but it is also crucial for private contractors to be involved. We should ensure that there is communication between the community and private contractors in the case that the system needs professional repair. We should also work with community leaders to establish a plan to pay for the water distribution system, so that there are people responsible for fixing it in case of future damage. When there is a steady flow of funds, it is less likely that the system will fail. It is also less expensive to maintain the system than it is to replace it, so it would be really effective to build a fund specifically for this purpose.
As you guys all know, the Kibuon project is very new, although we still aren't sure that this project has passed no-go or go status, since we haven't been on this assessment trip yet. It isn't too early to start thinking about how we can be successful with the project. Some measures that Madison and I have researched and think definitely need to be implemented if we decide to work on this project. The first one is community involvement. The community needs to participate in the project and want this project to be successful in order for it to work. We also need to make sure that we are training people how to fix the project that we build. Having a community member or skilled professional that knows their way around the project will definitely be helpful. We also think that there should be a manual that we make detailing how to fix the well in the case that it breaks. The other important thing that we need to do is establish a system of raising funds in case a part breaks. This may mean charging the community to use the source.
Works cited.
Thank you for listening to our presentation.